Hello, I'm Dr. Natália Pinazza. I'm a senior lecturer in Latin American Lusophone Studies at the University of Exeter, and I'm the project lead of the AHRC IAA-funded project, the Lower Otter Restoration Project in translation. The Lower Otter Restoration Project here in Budleigh Salterton, East Devon, is a pioneering project in climate adaptation, and it was inaugurated in March 2024. Because of its impact, the project involved many partners in the local community, and the response of local artists to the Lower Otter Restoration Project is noteworthy. So I partnered with the Environment Agency, which is a government body and one of the major partners in the Lower Otter Restoration Project, to explore the role of culture in communicating climate adaptation solutions to the wider public. Because the project enabled natural process to be reinstated, that is, the reconnection of a river, estuary, and floodplain, nature-based solution projects like the Lower Otter Restoration Project speak to global concerns as we are witnessing record flooding disasters. So as part of my research, I'm also investigating the role of cultural translations in intercultural dialogue. And the question is, how can the knowledge and expertise acquired in a pioneer project such as the Lower Otter Restoration Project be transmitted to other nations like Brazil?
My name is Medeiros, and I am a PhD researcher at the University of Exeter. My project involves the use of nature-based solutions, specifically the use of native legume trees to improve productivity and mitigate climate change in pastures located in the Brazilian Amazon forest. When we use the term nature-based solutions, we are talking about ways to incorporate nature and its ecological services into human activities, with the main idea to promote sustainability. There are plenty of initiatives, both in the UK and in Brazil, related to NBS. And when we try to bring all these initiatives together, it's a win-win situation. But it's important to bear in mind that there may be some communication challenges when trying to implement NBS projects developed in the UK in the Brazilian context. First of all, this approach needs to be decolonial, which means that the idea cannot be carved in stone, because something that worked in the UK will not necessarily work the same way elsewhere. As both realities are completely different, the people involved are different, with different backgrounds, beliefs, and desires. For instance, the UK has a temperate climate and Brazil is mainly a tropical country. So the species are totally different and respond differently to the environment. Also, in some cases, the local communities depend economically on the natural resources. So implementing a conservation project in these areas may bring about social and cultural consequences on these communities and even impact their economic activities. So the first thing that should be done in this new context is basically talk, get to know the reality, what they are already doing, and what they have to offer. Based on this, the NBS project can incorporate some of these things, creating a new identity which is more in line with this new context. As an example, when we first arrived in our study area in Brazil, we talked to our partners, which are Instituto Ouro Verde and UNEMAT in the state of Mato Grosso, and we learned that they are way advanced in a series of projects with the local communities. We had a first meeting where we presented our idea, the idea for our project, and they proposed some changes to meet their needs and to fit in their ongoing initiatives. So in the end, our project was more robust and much more meaningful for us and for them. As I said, it has to be a win-win situation. So basically, it is important to switch the idea of I'm bringing the solution for a problem you have to how can we work in collaboration, share our experiences, and create a solution together.
Hello, I'm Danielle Ramos, and I'm currently a Nature-Based Solutions Project Manager in Exeter Innovation, where I oversee collaborations between the University of Exeter and some Brazilian partners. Partnerships are fundamental in research projects because they can help us to size opportunities and increase our impact. And when we talk about impact in the environmental sciences and in climate-related projects, we are often referring to benefits to people and nature that are most threatened by human-caused changes. Therefore, these benefits often need to be delivered overseas. And Brazil is one of these places with urgent needs of solutions to mitigate damage from climate change and to promote adaptation. Partnering with Brazilian institutions can provide them resources and funds they need for this and increase the exchange of technical and practical expertise needed to build effective results. I can see the benefits of interacting with Brazilian institutions in practice in my day-to-day work. It's impressive how much people can produce when working in a place that allows for collaboration and mutual learning. We often underestimate the amount of knowledge that can be produced by people with different backgrounds and life experiences. And the Brazilian partners usually bring technical skills and practical experiences that bring the goals of the projects closer to real demands of the society. And this is fundamental to produce results that have real impact on people's well-being and in nature, and that are effective in a long term. International partnerships are challenging, however, both due to cultural differences and to funding conditions. Besides, they require a constant monitoring to ensure the collaboration is equitable and fair and based on mutual learning. But it's worth it to overcome these challenges, given the impactful things that we can create together. The Global North, besides, has been the major contributor to climate change, and these partnerships are an opportunity to play their role in historical reparation and to promote investments where they are mostly needed.
To explore the intercultural dialogue in transmitting expertise acquired in a climate adaptation project, like the Lower Otter Restoration Project, also known as LORP, it's not simply translating sentences into another language. When you are communicating expertise gained in a climate adaptation project, you need to consider both contexts: the place where the nature-based solution was originally designed and the place where the project could potentially be developed. So, for instance, when translating LORP-related documents into Portuguese, we need to bear in mind both the English and Brazilian biodiversity. And Ben Nash, the project translator, is very familiar with both contexts.
My name is Ben Nash. I'm an Exeter graduate. I studied Portuguese, and as part of my year abroad, I studied at the Universidade Federal de Santa Catarina, and I worked at a restoration project located in the Atlantic Forest, São Paulo, Brazil. I'm very passionate about conservation and restoration, having seen firsthand the incredible ability the natural world has to bounce back when given the opportunity. As a keen amateur naturalist and photographer, the former rice fields of rural São Paulo amaze me with their richness, something that might have seemed impossible just 30 years ago when the reserve was used for monoculture. The LORP is a restoration project in my backyard, and to be able to combine my passion for language with my love for nature and the Southwest has been incredible.
As a former student, I knew Ben could draw on the skills he developed during his degree and his year abroad in Brazil, because our programs here at the University of Exeter are in line with a curriculum for change, and we encourage transferable skills development. So it's great that Ben could join me in this project. So as part of the project, Ben will talk through some LORP-related translations.
As the Lower Otter Restoration Project is a nature-based solution project, challenges arose not only from the grammatical differences between English and Portuguese, but also the vast difference in ecological landscapes of Britain versus Brazil. In this presentation, I will discuss these challenges and the methods I use to solve them. Now, in your head, imagine the Brazilian coastline. Imagine you're picturing tropical beaches like Copacabana, mangroves and coral reefs. I don't think Budleigh Salterton has crossed your mind, and this highlights one of the key challenges. The coastal habitats found here in the temperate North Atlantic differ significantly from those in largely equatorial tropical Brazil. Therefore, deeper research is often required to ensure the suitability of terms. Suggested translations provided by bilingual dictionaries require double-checking to make sure they reflect accurately the habitat in question. And whilst doing so, it is necessary to consider the target audience. What may be a common term in Portugal or Mozambique may not be suitable for a Brazilian demographic. A notable example is the term mudflat, which is key to describing the ecosystems within the Otter Estuary. As a starting point, I use bilingual dictionaries like those of Collins and Cambridge, which provided multiple suggestions. One of these was Pantanal. But the Pantanal, as many Brazilians know, is a vast freshwater wetland in Brazil, vastly different from the tidal mudflats in the LORP project. The Lower Otter certainly doesn't feature jaguars or anacondas like the Pantanal. The Linnaean classification system was invaluable here. The scientific naming system ensures consistency across languages. For example, the English word for wolf and the Portuguese word lobo are both identified by the binomial name Canis lupus, allowing me to cross-reference species names in English with their Brazilian equivalents. For instance, to translate goosander, I found its Latin name Mergus merganser and used this to search on the website iNaturalist, an online crowdsourced species identification system, providing the translation Merganser grande. This is a method that ensures scientific accuracy across both languages. I repeated this for pied avocet, Recurva rostra avoceta, and found the translation Alphaiote, and so on and so forth. Although some species posed unique challenges, such as the European otter, Lutra lutra. The translation of otter is lontra. However, to a Brazilian audience, this could refer to the neotropical otter or even the iconic giant otters of the Amazon. Therefore, to avoid confusion, I found that one can add adjectives to lontra, creating a compound noun to highlight the specific species. The most common for Lutra lutra would be Europaea or comum. I chose Lontra europaea, a more geographically specific term which avoids the Eurocentricity of comum. This species isn't common in Brazil after all. Another tricky example was the dormouse, Muscardinus avellanarius. Several translation options existed, such as leirau, hatau or arganaz, but I ultimately adopted arganaz after consulting a somewhat unconventional source, BBC Nature documentaries translated into Brazilian Portuguese. To conclude, translating a climate adaptation project developed in Britain for Brazilian audiences can pose many unique challenges. For ecological terminology, it was a challenge to translate our North Atlantic temperate climate for an audience based in a largely equatorial and tropical region. Dictionary suggestions often failed to convey the specific nature of the environments they were translating. By considering such nuances, I was able to do further research and ultimately find more accurate translations than bilingual dictionaries could suggest. The key to success was in academic resources, scientific classification, and prior knowledge of the topic to ensure accuracy and comprehensibility. Additionally, many challenges were posed by the different grammar of both English and Portuguese. Whilst many of the solutions came from prior experience, there are many occasions where I had to research even the way English functions to be able to translate successfully. This was also true regarding vocabulary. I now know more about dam construction than I had ever imagined. Overall, this presentation highlighted the importance of context, research, and cultural understanding when translating a nature-based solution like the Lower Otter Restoration Project.
As part of the AHRC IAA-funded project, the Lower Otter Restoration Project in Translation, I also organized an exhibition in the Forum at the University of Exeter between the 18th November and the 22nd November 2024. In partnership with the Environment Agency, I identified and collected creative responses to the Lower Otter Restoration Project. The exhibition displayed the culture production that emerged from LORP to communicate climate adaptation projects to a wider audience. The Lower Otter Restoration Project exhibition testified to the impact of climate adaptation projects on the local community and biodiversity in the region. It also showed how local artists registered the transformations engendered by the project and documented
these changes through songs, textile art, illustrations, and photography. Wildlife photographer David White gave a talk at the exhibition launch, alongside talks from Paul Painter, the composer of the project song, Song of the Otter River, and Ben Nash, the project translator. The exhibition and the launch event were included in the curriculum, more specifically in the syllabus of the final year module Green Matters in Modern Languages and Cultures, so students had the chance to learn about LORP as an example of climate adaptation solution through local cultural production.
Hi everyone, so welcome to the Lower Otter Restoration Project exhibition launch.
So you can see not only when the sea comes in, but when the river is in flood, it can be potentially a really big problem. This now is when the tide has just gone out and the birds are beginning to come in, and you see the new road bridge in the background. A couple of shots of that. When we get particularly high tides, huge volumes of water come down in onto these marshes. Please bear that in mind, because a bit later on I'll refer back to it again, because it is quite a major change on the ecosystem. Some things like fish benefit, others have to learn to tolerate huge differences in water levels. So to give you an idea, on a waning moon, the difference between a high tide and a low tide might only be 4 foot of water, whereas on a full moon and a really good high tide you could have 12 feet, so over 4 meters of water coming in, an absolute huge amount. If we now go on to these beavers, so very briefly on the beavers, the male wears a green ear tag and they mate for life, and the female who wore a pink tag disappeared in the spring of 23. And he was all at 6s and 7s for a number of months, then he came up with this new partner. And here she is coming to have a look at me. She's found where I'm hiding, and they managed to have a couple of kits this year. So we're back to breeding on the Lower Otter again now. We do get otters about. I think while the project was on, they were essentially nocturnal. They didn't like the noise, they didn't like the disturbance, they didn't like where it was difficult to hide. But the beavers have begun to use the marsh on a regular basis, and I think as a result of that the otters will be following where the beavers go, and I wouldn't be surprised before too long if we start seeing first fish that have been caught and partially eaten by otters, and then soon after that I'd expect someone to get a photograph of an otter on the new marsh. They're quite secretive, difficult, intelligent animals, but it's really nice when you get pleasing photos of them. Just worth mentioning that when I saw this animal, the mum had 2 cubs. One I called the shy nervous one, and this other one I called the confident curious one. And I was able to sort of crawl up the river a bit, rustle and squeak a bit, and he had to come up and find me and have a look up, and that's why I got that photograph. We've had the privilege of osprey there. In fact, they began to come in even before the sea had been allowed access to the area. It was something I hoped would turn up within 5 years. So have it there right at the beginning of the survey was absolutely fantastic. Anything that eats fish is doing very well there at the moment. So the cormorant numbers have gone from 2 or 3. I've had as many as 15 down there, and they're very good at catching fish. Here's one taking quite a large eel. That was quite a struggle, but it did manage. Egret numbers have increased massively. We're possibly now between about 50 and 60 down there. I would hope within the next year or two there's a really good chance there might be an attempt to breed in there.
So yeah, I graduated in July. I studied Portuguese and Spanish here, and I'm big into nature, and so Natália thought that would be useful in this project as the translator. And even my own experience from my year abroad, I use, also my experience from living here in the southwest. I know the environments here. I got to know the environments in Brazil.
Sort of the brief was this came through the Clinton Devon estates, which were some of the land which had been used in the project was on. So there's a Lord Clinton who's currently, there is a present Lord Clinton, but the recently deceased, unfortunately, Lord Clinton, commissioned this song because he wanted some kind of, I think, legacy, partly for children, because some of these children were very young when the project started, or certainly when the project was mooted. So we wanted a historical legacy, and I think, and something that might last in their memory a little bit longer. So with both songs that of this type, which I got into quite by accident, by writing a song about the importance of bit of key, it's not the sort of thing I normally write. I started off with a brief of thinking, okay, we need some ancient history without going back into too far into the Jurassic past. So we got the original history, then sort of bringing it more up to date, then why it was done, and then what was happening. I did have to put one verse that we probably near the end, which is there was a certain amount of dissent. It's a big project. It's changed a lot of people's lives, and it's changed people's access to the river and affected farmland and so on. So I did have to put a nod to that, but whilst keeping it rhyming and sounding like a song. There was originally one less verse than that, so apologies for some of you sitting there very patiently thinking, how many more verses? But the original one with these birds in, I took out because I thought it's a lot of words, children trying to get their mouths around all the lyrics. And they said, can we put the verse back in? Because the children really love that verse. So it probably touches on a fraction of the bird life there. And again, it has to rhyme, has to scan. So apologies to anything I missed out there. But that's how it came around. And I was approached by the education officer, Kate, who she'd seen some other stuff I'd done. But it's fascinating. It really was. And it's reasonably accurate. I've had a couple of people say, that doesn't actually happen quite like that. Well, poetic license. That's what I'm saying. But hopefully some more songs will come out there as well.
At first, when you look at a project like the Lower Otter Restoration Project, you think of hard sciences. LORP is a very technical project. It was awarded an ICE Southwest Civil Engineering Award. So it's not necessarily obvious how it is relevant to the humanities. But then we cannot forget the impact that climate adaptation projects have on the local communities and their global relevance. And whenever there is an impact, we often find that there is engagement from the local community. So it has been truly wonderful to see all the cultural production in response to LORP and to be able to disseminate this production to a wider audience. The Lower Otter Restoration Project in translation also explored how crucial intercultural dialogue is to exchange expertise and knowledge acquired in a pioneer project like LORP. The need for sharing and exchanging with other nations and cultures of what is essentially an engineering project is highly relevant to the humanities.
The river, it rises in the black down hills and flows 30 miles to the sea. It's powered the mills and watered the land for many a century. As it weaves its way south to the river mouth, it's fed by the streams either side. As it finds its way past village and farm, by Budleigh Brook meets the tide. So flow